I know. No, she just needed. She's just on.
Well, probably, yeah, well, mine's off.
Yeah.
No, she's very, very, it just says yes. No, I even help.
All right, welcome to seminar number 5 in our Tranquility Meditation seminars. Today's main topic is psychoanalytic interpretations of Tranquility meditation. And our practicum will be a meditation, a classical meditation called Developing Equanimity. And it can be, we can do it, it's an imagination exercise, it's a visualization exercise. So I think you'll find it useful. The course materials are available for download. Now, some people have said they've had a hard time getting to the website using the navigatealliance.org URL. And so this actually is the hard link that points directly to the Network Solutions server. So go ahead and write that down and see if that will work. And
Oh,
yeah.
go back.
Writers out here.
And so that would just take you directly to the website. Better?
Yes.
All right, so has everyone got that? Okay. So the website itself is now has everything out on its own web page for all of the materials. And so there's the Tranquility Meditation page. It's everything is current as of today. There's today's PowerPoint presentation. And then there would be, just to download, just right click and then say save link as, and that'll bring up the dialog box here where you can just save it. Okay, or you can just double click on it. It will open up a new tab, and then here, since it's a PDF document, the PDF program will just allow you to do the same thing over here. Just move it over to the menu bar there, click on save, and then it'll bring up the same. Okay, and then the same thing for the audio files. If you want to download them, go ahead and just save link as, and that'll bring up that same dialog box. Now, if you wanted to listen to them, just on the computer right there, double click on it. But that'll take some time to load into the into whatever program you've got there for your website, for your browser. So my recommendation is to download them rather than listen to them online. All right? And so that should allow you to find the website pretty easily. So again, there's the hard link for the website, and that points directly to the server itself rather than to a domain name server. Okay? The way that this works, there's these big servers out there that are called domain name servers, and they have a hard-coded registration, they have IP addresses and all those things for the actual website, and then the URL, which we type in the address bar, then has a database entry that they link up and points to the hard server. So this should help if you're having trouble. Sometimes firewalls and other, things that are working behind the scenes will block stuff like this, so that may be when you're having trouble. Any questions? Yeah.
So do we need to download this because it won't always be there for us, right?
Yes, that's true. I mean, I'll leave it up for quite a while, but sooner or later I'll take it down to make room for the next stuff.
Put it on a mini disk or something.
Yeah, or just download it to your computer or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right. We're back on our regular weekly schedule. The next meeting is next Tuesday, October 23rd, and then our hiatus is a couple, 2 weeks later on November 6th. Okay, so this seminar pretty much goes straight through with two hiatuses. So we'll be back again next Tuesday. All right. Quick review of everything that we've been talking about so far. Psychophysiological coherence is the synchronization of breathing rate, which then lowers the breathing rate down to 3 breaths a minute with a ratio of a 15-second exhalation and a 5-second inhalation, then lowers the heart rate to 60 beats or less, and then immediately lowers the brainwave patterns to 10, somewhere in the alpha range, right around 10 cycles per second, so somewhere between 8 and 12 cycles per second. And this then creates this coherent state of the organism itself, which is where almost all of the phenomena that are associated with meditation and hypnosis occur. Yeah.
Should you just breathe in normally, or should you go?
It should be natural. Just breathe. Just hum.
Oh,
Yeah,
so you
see
don't
the hum?
take it a big breath so it gives you time to just
No,
breathe.
remember that the 15 to 5 ratio, that 15-second to 5-second ratio, that will build itself naturally.
Okay.
Okay? Again, with the humming, keep in mind that the humming is based on the ancient practice of mantram meditation. You have a mantram, which is a phrase that you would say, okay? And the phrases were usually shorthand versions of some, mystical or religious kind of thing. But their intention was not necessarily to focus your attention on the content of the mantram, but it was specifically designed so that as you spoke it, as you essentially sang it, it would create this particular phenomenon. Okay? And it was designed specifically for those people who found it very difficult to do the classical meditation. All right? So it's a remedial program. Okay? For people who can't do it the normal way. And so it was designed to be that way. But it gets the results very rapidly. So you don't have to worry about anything. Just do the humming. And that will automatically take care of everything. Yeah?
I believe there are such things as stupid questions. I have one. Are you supposed to hum a particular song or just make a noise?
No, the CD, remember, has the specific harmonics in it. And I set the harmonics at 130 beats per minute, which is an A below middle C. Because some research indicates that has the highest productivity of nitric oxide in the nasal passages.
The
Okay.
which? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The what? I don't hear what.
It's I basically set the humming. The CD has the tones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you can hum to anything.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, you can hum to anything you want. Hum to your favorite song. All right. The problem with that is that it's usually changing keys a little bit, so you're going to have a little bit different harmonics, and you're going to go up and down. This one is a standard, just straight harmonics and all of the harmonics associated with the A below middle C. Okay, so you can hum to anything you like, but this one is designed specifically so that it's an easy hum, and you just stay at the same humming. Okay, and that will automatically take you wherever you need to go. It will automatically begin to lengthen the exhalation cycle, and then the inhalation cycle is automatic. Okay, and then pretty soon you'll find yourself at that 15 to 5 ratio, and then the next thing you'll discover is that there is that long pause at the end of the exhalation cycle. And that's where things begin to get interesting, is in that break, in that period when you're not breathing at all.
But you've already hit the 15.
Yes, well, no, not necessarily.
No?
Yeah, that the extended exhalation will happen on its own too.
But I mean the pause.
Yeah, the pause, no,
Is that after the
that could
15?
happen at any time.
Oh, okay.
All right, and again, 15 to 5 is, statistical. Again, we're talking, we know that that works, and we know that many meditators who do meditate have that particular ratio, but they also have longer ones and shorter ones. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just hum, and the body will automatically synchronize itself. And then from there, you're able to just move off into the more, into the actual content of whatever meditation you're doing. This will get you into the coherent state, which is the springboard, the entry point, the doorway, through which all of these other things occur. All right? So did that answer your question? Yeah, just hum. All you have to do is just hum. And everything, the body will, the avatar is programmed to do this. This is part of it's a design feature. So we don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is just hum, and it will automatically do what it's designed to do. All right? And like I said, the CD, the auditory tone that I selected has, several harmonics within it, so you can hum wherever you like. It spans like 2 octaves, and it's got, other notes besides the A that are all harmonized with it. So it doesn't really matter. Just hum, and that will automatically take care of whatever's going on. All right? So that's our psychophysiological model of what's going on. The meditative absorptions are sort of our guidepost. The Buddha talked about these 8 jhanas, these 8 meditative absorptions, each one of them, of course, building on the previous ones. So ultimately, when we start off, we're here, we're just here, externally focused and everything else. And then systematically, we will begin to move further and further and further and further away from the material world until finally at the 8th absorption, we are completely away from anything to do with the material world. And remember that was based upon the old Ogdoadic 8-part system based on the old astrotheological concept of 7 planets. All right, starting with Saturn, Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, the Moon. So we have those were the 7 planets that they knew about, including, assuming that the Sun was a planet. And so there are 7 levels that we have to go to. The old Gnostic myth, the Mandaean Gnostic cosmology said we come from the 8th realm, which is beyond this place. And as we are trapped in this place, we descend through the 7 planetary influences, and that, encases us in 7 planetary kinds of clothings, and then we're here. So in order to get back to where we belong, we have to basically reverse that process and get rid of all of these planetary incrustations over the soul. And that's what the 8 meditative absorptions are intended to do. One at a time, just literally find your way there. Now, again, this will just happen automatically, especially for the first 2. Because it's just sort of an automatic result of going into a coherent state. Now, the rest of them you sort of have to work at. And the meditation we'll do today is one of those things you can do to work at it. All right? So that's where the meditative absorptions go. Dualist interactionism is our current scientific model for how the thinking substance, which we are, the soul, interacts with this material body and through the body with the extended universe out there. And remember that Dr. Eccles' hypothesis is that the thinking substance which we are is some kind of quantum wave phenomenon, quantum probability phenomenon, which we don't understand yet. And somehow it interfaces here at the supplemental motor area at the top of the nervous system, where it then literally, like reading a computer screen, it reads off the data. Reads off the data from the organism and then inputs data into the organism through this link up here. That's his model. And so since 1994, when he published this model, there have been advances made towards creating the circumstances that would allow us to actually verify this experimentally. So we're getting closer to having an answer about whether that is a good model or not. So that's dualist interaction. There are these two separate substances and they interact. So based upon all of that, we then get to the point where we're considering this thing here to be our specific avatar. That is a specific vehicle for our consciousness to interact with the extended universe. Custom designed for us, so to speak. It's ours and ours alone. No one else has access to it. No other consciousness has access to this. Only we do. Okay? And so it's ours. And it has all of these wonderful features. I mean, it's very intelligent. It has 30 trillion or so moving parts. And, it's got all of these things that are going on outside of our awareness because it's on the other side. It's on the material side. And so we don't have direct access to that. What we have direct access to is these high-level phenomenological constructs that are literally created by the avatar in the nervous system. And then we put it all together because that's our job. That's what consciousness does. It puts all of that data together into this synthetic totality that we experience. All right, Buddhist and Gnostic soteriology, we just talked about that a little bit, the 7 planetary realms. And the fact that the purpose of this place is to learn about all of this stuff so that we may escape. So in that sense, it's basically a nihilistic viewpoint. We want to get away from all of this pain and suffering. And the way to do that is to recognize that we have to get back to where we originated from, and that's that 8th level. And the way to do that is to systematically distance ourselves from this physical material world. Okay, so that's the basic soteriology coming to us from the ancients. The way that the initial Buddhist student was introduced to these concepts was through the cemetery contemplations. Go out and sit on the cemetery plains, wherever they happen to be, for 30 days and 30 nights. Your friends and family will bring you food. You're going to sleep there. You're going to walk around. You're going to watch bodies, human bodies, various stages of decomposition. You're going to watch the animals come and eat them. You're going to watch the birds eat them. You're going to smell the decay. You're going to see the organs. You're going to see the spine, the skeleton, the brain. You're going to see all of that stuff. And so for 30 days, you just immerse yourself in the fact that this particular avatar is, it has a definite expiration date on it. Not only does it have an expiration date, it's also very fragile. It can be damaged and, fatally damaged very easily. So that forms the basis of the soteriology. And remember that for the Buddhists and the Gnostics and the people at this time, they believed that this was a continuing process. We were thrust back here, thrown down here again and again and again. For the Mandaeans, it was because we were being tortured, basically, by the archons who enjoyed our suffering. They like us to be suffering. So as soon as we would escape, as soon as the avatar would die, and we would have a shot at getting out of here, they would run down, grab us, and throw us back in another avatar, so that they could watch us suffer some more. So the brute facts of existence were what formed the core of the soteriology of the ancients. And that has not altered. That hasn't really changed much. We're still subject to old age, illness, death, pain and suffering throughout the entire lifespan. So that core of the soteriology is still exactly the same. And the cemetery contemplations, although we don't have cemetery planes anymore, we have movies and TV shows that will show us the internal organs and people bleeding and people being hacked to pieces and shot and, in car crashes and tortured and all that other thing. We can actually visually observe all of those things, all of those events, going to movies and TV shows. So we can actually do the cemetery contemplations while we're watching TV. Okay? Then we talked about the ancient practice of the assumption of the God forms. The ancient conceptions of gods, the ones we get from the mythologies, were specifically designed not as explanations of natural phenomena. Okay, they never were. That was never an explanation of natural phenomena. What it was a visualization exercise. Okay, now for the exoteric people, the people outside of the mysteries, most of the people on the planet, if they heard these stories, they were passed off as if they were simply explanations of the natural world. But for the initiates, they knew better. Okay? Our ancestors were incredibly smart. They knew what was going on out here. They knew that there were no gods, that there were no turtles, that there were no titans, that there were none of these things. They were immersed in the natural world. What these were specifically designed, very carefully crafted elements of their psychodramas that they then used to visualize and to assume these God forms. And that comes to us on the Christian side, in the Western tradition, through the ancient practice of the imitatio Christi, the imitation of Christ. Now, at an exoteric level, you're basically going to try to imitate Christ's life, which means you're going to give up all your wealth, you're going to go around and help the poor and help the ill and do all of those things and just sort of get involved in the actual physical work of a Christian minister, so to speak. Okay, however, at the esoteric level, it is still assumption of the God form. Okay, and so then we used as our koan meditation the passage from John 14:6, for I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, and that was what that was specifically designed for. That particular text is a Mandaean Gnostic text. John the Baptist was their version of the Jesus Christ myth. And so that became the foundation for their imitation of Christ, assumption of the God form meditation. And the koan meditation, you just sit in your meditative state and just repeat slowly the words of whatever koan you're working on, over and over and over. And you'll pause. And in the middle of all of that, when you're in that extended exhalation cycle, insight happens. Okay? You'll know it when it happens. It'll be obvious. All right, so any questions about any of that? Yeah?
When you go through the various stages, are these abrupt transitions, or do they just, is it continuum?
It depends. It's going to be an abrupt transition. Each one of them is going to be abrupt. All of a sudden, you'll just realize that you're there. Okay, because in order to realize where you are, you have to break out of the meditative state and perform a reflection. Okay, and so the minute you do that, of course, the meditative state is altered, and you're no longer in the state you were in before. You're now in a reflective state. So it happens abruptly, and it's, each of those meditative absorptions is an aha moment. That the aha moment comes after you return and realize, wow, that was it. That was where I was at that particular point. Okay, so in the Zen tradition, they talk about kensho, which is this flash of lightning, and that's their image for it. That's their symbol for it. This flash of lightning that illuminates everything for a brief second, and then it's gone. Okay, and so that's what they're talking about, and it will have an emotional impact on the person as they realize later where they had gone, where they were in this continuum. Okay? And again, this is not something we can force. We cannot program it. We can't schedule it. Okay? Next Thursday, I'm going to be in the 5th meditative absorption. Okay? Can't do that. Okay? We have to just continuously enter the meditative state, and when it's time, by the grace of the gods, it will happen. And we can't force it. There's no way to force it. There's no way to plan it. There's no way to program it. We just have to keep at it. And just keep returning again and again and again and again. Now, classically, they talk about 7-year cycles, 7 years of meditation. The Buddha, you took 6 years to reach his enlightenment. Bodhidharma took 7 years to reach his enlightenment. In modern times, we have done quite a bit of research over the last 20 years on the acquisition of skills, skill sets, mastery. And what we have discovered over and over and over again is that there seems to be a threshold. 10,000 hours is the minimum amount of time for mastering any kind of skill. So it's 10,000 hours not just of random kinds of stuff, but 10,000 hours of very focused, reflective, reiterative, analytical kinds of practice. And at the end of that 10,000 hours, roughly, then something magical happens and bingo, it transforms you into a person who has mastery of that particular skill. And then you start over and do another 10,000 hours and it takes you to the next level of mastery. So if we break that down, 10,000 hours, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day would be somewhere between 7 and 9 years. Okay, so that's what you're looking at with any skill set. It doesn't matter what it is. Things like this are no different in essence from learning to play golf or learning to play tennis or billiards or whatever you're thinking about. It's just the same thing. Continuous practice every day, regularly, thinking about what you were doing, learning it, going back to the text to get additional insight and additional instruction. But it comes down to the hours, it comes down to the numbers and crunching. Okay? Yeah?
No, that's the question I was going to say. Does that apply for everything?
Yes, it applies absolutely.
So you're going to be a master.
Yeah. Mastery, the first level of mastery takes about 10,000 hours of concerted practice. And so that's what we're up against. All right? So, that's why the classical instructions are, there's only 2. Begin, continue. That's it. Start and then keep going, until you finally reach wherever you can in this particular lifetime. All right? Any other questions about this?
So are you
Yeah.
going to say that people who have these flash ideas have been meditating?
Yes. You
Okay.
don't get those kinds of experiences, the
I agree
meditative
with
kinds of
that.
experiences without meditative practice.
All right.
Now you can have what Abraham Maslow called peak experiences. And those typically don't require any kind of formal meditative practice. We have those continuously throughout our lifetimes. Okay, those are times when just out of the blue, we'll have feelings of peace and harmony and sort of this cosmic consciousness that everything is connected. And that's what he described as peak experience as. And he was specifically looking at notable figures at the time like Albert Einstein and some of the authors and other people. He was doing research on their kinds of psychology, and he discovered that they would have these moments of peak experience when things seemed to click, and they were very transitory. They'd last 20 minutes or so and then be gone.
And then they couldn't recall them.
Well, no, they could recall it. It's just that it was sort of fleeting, and then it was gone, and then they never knew when they were going to happen. Peak experiences are random events. Okay? This is even though we can't program the Kensho or the enlightenment or the movement in the absorptions, we can certainly program the activity. And so by doing the activity consistently, regularly, in a thoughtful way, we increase the probability of these events happening. And once they happen, they're not like the peak experience. They're permanent. This is what psychoanalysis would call this is a structural shift. This is a structural change in the actual person. It's permanent. It doesn't ever go away. And then you build on that with the next phase. Okay? And again, the only way to understand this is to actually do it.
Do you ever question yourself?
But about
Did that really happen,
no,
you don't?
no, yeah, because it is, like I said, it's a structural shift. It's like being struck by the lightning. There is no doubt about what happened. Absolutely none. Okay, especially because you're pursuing it. This is not a random occurrence out of the blue. This is the result of decades of intense practice. So when it happens, when that structural shift occurs, there's no doubt what it was. You may be in a a confused state, a dazed state, because of the actual emotional impact of the event. But there's no doubt about what happened. And again, it stays with you, essentially forever. That's the point of the soteriology. By doing this again and again and again and again and again, we will finally achieve the necessary amount of stability and power and knowledge to tell the archons basically to get out of the way and let us go back home. Okay? And so that's what this is all about. And remember, the archons are demigods. They have a lot of authority and a lot of power. They created this place. So if we're going to challenge them, we have to be on their level, according to the Mandaeans, according to the Gnostics. So that's why it takes so long, and that's why it's so difficult, because we are literally becoming gods. Only a god can challenge another god. And if we're going to get back home, we have to be able to stand toe-to-toe with the 7 archons, one after the other. Okay? So these are the kind of, teaching fables that they put together to try to help explain what it is and what it is we're doing and the purpose that we're doing it. Okay? So, but yeah, there's never any doubt. When it happens, I mean, it is, like I said, it's that flash of insight, it's that flash of lightning, and there's no doubt about what just happened. There's that structural shift. It actually makes a change. Okay? If there is a doubt, continue. Okay? If there is no doubt, continue. Okay? We're in this.
So we have that phrase, she saw the light.
The concept of enlightenment literally comes from that, yes, because when this happens, the flash of light really occurs. It's an actual phenomenon that the consciousness experiences. It is a bolt of light. That occurs all the way through the history of this whole concept. Okay? That's what the term enlightenment means. One who has seen the light, one who has encountered the light. Okay? And so there are various stages, each one of which is an enlightenment, where the light occurs, where the light happens. All right? Anything else? All right, today we're going to take a look at psychoanalysis and the way that it interprets the phenomena that we've been talking about. We're going to take a look at the psychodynamic structure of the psyche, how they say that the mind is put together, the psychodynamic ego states, because they're a little different than other concepts of ego states, religion as an illusion, and the oceanic feeling. So these are all concepts that appeared early in psychoanalysis as they began to build a system. So it's based on the work of Sigmund Freud. There he is in 1921. He died in 1939, so this is about 18 years before his death. He died, by the way, from smoking cigars. Anyway, this is the portrait for the cover of Life magazine from the Life Photo Archives in 1921 when they did a profile of him. So the psychodynamic structure of the psyche. In 1923, in German, he published a book called The Ego and the Id. This little teeny book right here. All right? And he talks about the structure. There's a conscious and an unconscious in the psyche. The ego is a body ego. It's an ego based upon the body itself and its perceptions of the world.
Primitive native action, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, we're talking, it's not an ego, it's not like the concept of the soul that we're talking about. The ego that he's talking about is here. It's a physical ego based on the developmental cycle of the body itself. And then he talks about the superego or the ego ideal, which is the error of the Oedipus complex. We'll talk about that in a second. He talks about the id as the source of libido, eros, and thanatos. Then that leads us into the structure of relationships. So at the very beginning, on page 3, He says, to most people who have been educated in philosophy, the idea of anything psychical which is not also conscious is so inconceivable that it seems to them absurd and refutable simply by logic. I believe this is only because they have never studied the relevant phenomena of hypnosis and dreams, which, quite apart from pathological manifestations, necessitate this view of a conscious and an unconscious. Okay? Their psychology of consciousness is incapable of solving the problems of dreams and hypnosis. Okay? In other words, if there is only consciousness, we cannot explain dreams, and we cannot explain hypnotic phenomena. And he's totally correct. Okay? On the other hand, psychoanalysis can't explain it thoroughly either. But he doesn't say we're trying, the attempt is to explain it. He's saying psychoanalysis is the method, it's the tool by which we will explain, ultimately, the difference between the conscious and the unconscious and the fact that it occurs. So there's a conscious part of us and an unconscious part. Now the ego is a body ego. It's a body ego built up from the developmental stages of the organism itself. And we'll take a look at those developmental cycles in just a second, so we'll make a little more sense. Now, the id is the term for the unconscious that he uses, which is the source of all of the psychic energy. Okay, that the body then uses and the ego then uses in order to accomplish whatever we're doing. In order to talk, walk around, move, breathe, whatever, it takes this libido energy. Okay, now in the original German, the terms are simply I, ich, for the ego, and s, or it, for the id. So when it was translated by James Strachey and some of the other translators back then, they didn't want to just call it the I and the it. They wanted to have some differentiation in English. And so they used the old Latin terms, ego for I and id for it. Okay? And superego is just, super, basically. Okay? Super. So what we have, libido for Freud is sexual energy, period. That's where it comes from. We experience it as sexuality. Okay? So everything is coming from this sexual reservoir of sexual energy. He called it libido. And then he said there in this particular book, he talks about two specific instincts that drive us, that use this sexual energy in order to motivate us to do certain things. Eros, which is the instinctual sex drive, which represents our desire to create in general. And thanatos, which is the death instinct which motivates our desire to destroy. Okay? Because they noticed in the analysis, they noticed when their clients would come in and they would begin the analysis, there was always this sort of ambivalence about them. Yeah, they loved somebody, but they really wanted to kill them today. Okay? Yes, they liked their job, but they burned down the building if they could. So there was always this ambivalence about it. Ambivalence meaning that you can have these two components, these two emotional states at the same time. That moved around, that were not just static in here in static control, static balance. You were moving around back and forth between these two poles of experience. So he said, one of the ways that we might explain that is that there are two instincts literally encoded into the organism itself, Eros and Thanatos. All right, now based on that, he said there's really only two ways of relating to other humans. We can either seduce them, or we can attack them. That's it. Those are the only two possibilities. We're either going to try to have sex with them, or we're going to try to kill them. That's it. And then there are these these admixtures of the two because of the ambivalence. We can have sex with them and hurt them at the same time. Okay, and then he gets off into sadomasochism and these kinds of relationships there. So Freud is a strict materialist. He's a strict determinist, and he's a strict atheist. Okay? So he believes in nothing superior to this. Material is all that there is. There's no God, there's no devil, there's no nothing. There's what we've got here, and these are the explanations for our behaviors. Okay? The sexual energy that is then directed in two types of behaviors, erotic behaviors and destructive behaviors. And that's it. Everything can be explained in terms of this very simple structure. And if you actually do analysis, that's exactly what you see. Okay? So everything can be explained according to this really simple schema. We don't have to go very far from this schema in order to explain a lot of things. Okay? Now, the superego develops sort of a lot at the same time that the ego is developing. And we'll get to that in just a second. Any questions about this before we go on? No? Okay. Now, the developmental cycle is important because it leads us into the Oedipus complex, which is the conflict that is created there. So the developmental cycle, the id is given. It's what starts off there. It's this huge reservoir of energy that the organism has. And it's undifferentiated at the very beginning. The infant has no ego and no superego at the time it is born, but it does have an id. It has the id. It's all unconscious. The child at the beginning is nothing more than a collection of sexual energy and unconsciousness. That's what the infant would be. Physiological and psychological reservoir of the energy and the two instincts from which all other structures arise. And the id is controlled and dominated by the pleasure principle. It wants pleasure at all costs. So it will seek pleasure at the expense of every other need or desire or anybody else that gets in its way. The ego is created from the interaction of the avatar, to use our term, the interaction of the body with its environment. So it develops as the child grows, because it is now engaging in relationships with other people and elements and objects in the environment, and that's what creates the ego. As it encounters all of these things, it has to adapt. And it is that adaptation which creates the ego. Okay? And that it is dominated by the reality principle. That is, it needs to know what's real. What's actually real in the material world out there. And so it develops its concept, its map of reality based on its encounters with all of these objects. Okay? And for psychoanalysis, human beings are objects too. Object relations specifically is talking about relations with other humans. Okay, as well as with non-human objects in the world as well. The superego is the result of the ethical struggle which creates the ego ideal, and that is our moral conscience. It is, the superego is not universal. I mean, the structure is universal, but the actual conscience is not. The contents of that conscience. So there is a different moral structure for us living in America in the 21st century than there is for an Aborigine living in Australia at the same time. They have a different culture that will create a different moral conscience because they have different stricture, they have different constraints that they place on the child as it develops. Okay? So the superego is a structural feature, but its contents are determined by culture. The id is a structure and it is universal. The ego is a structure and it is universal. Okay? It may speak a different language, but it has to deal with the same material reality. Okay? Even the Aborigine has to deal with reality. However, the moral conscience is determined, the content of the moral conscience is determined by the culture. Okay? Now, the Oedipus complex is the struggle with sexual attraction to the opposite sex parents and competition with the same-sex parent for the affections of that opposite sex parent. So for a boy, there's this sexual attraction between the boy and the mother. And there is a constant competition between the boy and the father for the attention of the mother. So this is the classical Oedipus complex, Oedipus conflict that Freud talked about, based upon the old Greek myth of Oedipus, okay? Who killed his father and married his mother. So basically, that's exactly what the ancients were trying to tell us. This is what happens because of the sexual nature of human beings in a family structure. Now, for girls, it's the same kind of a situation, except now it's the father that is the object of the sexual attraction, and it's competition with the mother. Okay? So this sets up the initial conflict. This is the first conflict that the child has to has to figure out and has to adapt to. Yeah,
Is that universal?
yes,
All of us?
all of us.
Has that
Every culture,
struggle?
yep, every culture has to deal with this. Yeah, because we are sexual creatures and we are two sexes. Okay, if we were plants, we wouldn't have Oedipus complexes. All right, but since we're not plants, since we are sexual bisex, two sexes, that's what causes this, and it happens no matter what. It happens no matter what. In every child, there's going to be this particular situation that occurs. Even if the opposite, even if the same-sex parent is not there, the Oedipus complex will still be there because of the nature of sexuality, because of the nature of the way that we develop. Okay, so this is the first conflict. This is the very first conflict that the child has to negotiate from the very moment it's born. Because the first thing that happens normally is that the child needs to be nursed, and it's nursed by the mother. Okay, classically, it would be nursed at the mother's breast, which is a very intimate kind of connection between the child and the mother. All right, and so at that point, the child has no, it doesn't know that there are other objects out there. It doesn't know about anything else. It just knows that it is being nurtured by this object, which it recognizes as its mother. Okay, and so that just sort of is this universal kind of a situation. Later on, of course, it will begin to recognize that there are times when the mother's unavailable. And usually if the mother's unavailable, the mother object is unavailable, because the mother object is off doing things with the father object. Okay, this interferes with what? The pleasure of the child. So the id says, well, I'm going to fix this. And how does it do it? It does it in the only two ways it can. It either seduces the mother, or it acts aggressively, it cries. Okay? And it then begins to manipulate the environmental variables in its environment, namely the mother object and the father object, based on its crying and its seductive behaviors. And that then becomes the basis for the competition between it and the father for a boy and the mother for a girl. Is it successful in getting the mother object back, okay, with its crying and its seductive behaviors? If it is, then it continues to do those things, and the competition increases. All right. As the child grows up, of course, it has these infantile visualizations of actually killing the opposite sex parent. That's where the myth comes from. Okay. It also has infantile visualizations of having sex with the mother or the father in the case of the girl child. Yeah? Questions?
Killing an opposite sex parent,
Yes.
I think I've lost which sex we're with.
It just depends. If it's a girl, it will be killing the mother. If it's a boy, it'll be killing the father, killing the same-sex parent, so that it can have unobstructed access to the opposite sex parent.
And this is after they get past the nurturing stage?
No, this is all the time. This is the first conflict.
Okay, even though they still need the mother for survival, they want to kill her.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, this is a lot of conflict going on here,
Yeah.
and a lot of contradiction. Okay, which of course the child cannot resolve because it doesn't have the intellectual or the emotional stability to do that. It just can't. So it is locked in this primeval struggle, which it cannot escape and which it cannot resolve. Okay, and we forget about this. Our memories typically do not go back far enough to get us in touch with the actual beginnings of the Oedipus conflict. Typically not. However, we will see residues of that Oedipus conflict all the way through our entire lives. We will see that all the way through our entire lives until it is completely resolved, at which point all of those residues of the Oedipus complex will dissolve. Yeah.
Question.
Mhm.
If it's a girl child, is the mother aware that the daughter has these feelings for the father?
Yes. Absolutely. The unconscious mind knows all of this. Okay? Your unconscious mind is an open book to my unconscious mind. Nothing is hidden from the unconscious minds of each other. It's only at the conscious level that these things remain hidden and cause difficulties. All right? The unconscious minds are somehow psychically linked, and there have been papers, serious scholarly papers written about ESP in psychoanalysis. And so, there is this link that we cannot explain. The unconscious minds know everything that's going on with everything else.
I just had an aha moment about the psychodynamics
Yes.
of my family.
Yes, exactly.
Now,
Yeah, and so this is the first conflict that the child and the other people in the family have to negotiate. They have to navigate through this really dangerous, conflict continuously. And this then becomes the source of most neurotic and psychotic behaviors, is the failure to negotiate this particular conflict. If they manage to get through it alive, okay, without too much psychic damage, the residue will still be there, but then they can move on and tackle the next kinds of developmental challenges that they face. But this one is hanging out forever until it's resolved in analysis. Yeah.
Does this conflict when they're so young have anything to do with like teenagers that kill their parents?
With what? Sorry. Could you repeat the questions?
Teenagers that kill their parents.
They grow up and then they have a hate and then they
Yeah.
kill their mother,
They
kill
kill
their
their mother, kill their father, kill everybody. Yeah, because remember, if there's only two ways that we can relate to one another, okay, we can either have sex with each other or we can kill each other at the extremes. All right, everything else becomes this sort of muddy kind of indeterminate mixture of these two instincts, sexuality and aggression. And so that's what's happening at the unconscious level all the time. Which is why in the movies, what you see is an overt representation of what is going on in your unconscious mind right that moment. That's why it has such an attraction to us. Okay? Go and watch like any of the newer horror films. Okay? The slasher movies. The ones where there's just hacking and hewing and blood and gore and violence and all of that stuff. That is a pictorial representation of what Freud says and what analysis confirms is actually going on in your unconscious mind all the time. And you will see in the modern pictures, you will see an absolute linking between sex and violence, because you'll see sex on the screen and then immediately followed by violence, and then sex, and then violence, and sex and violence. And occasionally you'll actually see sadomasochistic sex and violence at the same time, depicted on the screen. Okay? That is not the people who make these movies know what they're doing. They've been schooled in psychoanalysis. They're following a long line of training starting with Edward Bernays back in the 1920s. Edward Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew. It was Freud's wife's sister's son. Okay? So Edward Bernays in the early 1900s goes and gets trained by Sigmund Freud in the way that the unconscious works. And he comes back to America and begins to construct what is now called the science of public relations. Okay? And his first major publication was, I think, in 1922. I'd have to check the date, but early 1920s. And it was called Propaganda. That's the title of the book. And in it, he outlines how, using psychoanalytic models, using this particular model, because it's accurate, it's exactly the way we are, we will be able to manipulate, without their knowing it, everybody on the planet by using specific psychodynamically charged imagery, phrases, and situational kinds of things. They will not even know what hit them, because we're going to bypass their conscious mind, we're going to talk directly to the id, and we're going to energize, manipulate, and control that vast reservoir of unconscious energies. And they will not know what they're doing. They'll be doing all of these things, and they will not even know why. Yeah?
I read somewhere not too long ago that he is kind of the father of all our advertising.
Absolutely.
Because he's the one that got us to think that we need this, we have to have this
Sure.
where we really don't.
Yeah. Yes.
And they fill it with sex.
They sell it with sex and they sell it with violence.
What did she say?
Absolutely, they sell it with sex.
She's the father.
Yeah. So, yeah,
As I recall, Oedipus himself didn't know that this was happening, did he?
true. He did not know that this was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oedipus, remember, the prophecy was that Oedipus would in fact kill his father and marry his mother. So what his family did was took him from their home, their palace, and they gave him to this couple to raise. And they said, keep him safe, because they didn't want this to happen. So what happens is later on, after he's a young adult, he basically is heading back to the capital. He meets his father on the road, doesn't realize it's father because he doesn't even know that he's adopted, kills this person, okay, and then because he's killed the king, he then now takes over as king of the little town, all right, marries his mother without knowing it's his mother. She doesn't know it's him either. Okay, later on it's revealed, and what do they do? What's the outcome?
He's Spanish,
He's blinded.
blinded.
Right. So again, we keep the myth. The myth structure here is very, very carefully constructed to tell us exactly what's going on. We don't know that we're involved in an Oedipus complex. We don't know that we're involved in this massive internal unconscious struggle to the death with our parents, basically. Okay, that's unconscious. He didn't know it was happening. And if we ever do find out, it's going to cause us such pain that we'll actually wish that we didn't know and we'll blind ourselves to it.
Would Freud have said that unconsciously Oedipus knew what was going on?
The unconscious knows, yes. Absolutely, because it's the source of all of this stuff. The id is what wants to do this.